welcome back to another episode of the Main Quest podcast. This is, of course, the number one retro gaming podcast that doesn't need a contrived time travel plot to reinvent itself. This is episode 101, and I am your host, Keith. Welcome, everybody, to Player vs. Podcast. During the month of April, I let you, dear listeners, gang up on me and throw all of your most loved or most hated games at me, and I play at least 3 of them and devote an episode to them. This month I will be putting out 3 on this here main feed, and a 4th one chosen by the patrons, 4 patrons, on Castlevania: Symphony of the Night. Before we get on to the show, if you're interested in that Symphony of the Night episode, head on over to patreon.com/themainquest. And for as low as $1, you'll get access to these main feed episodes a week early. Some of them have extra content in them that's cut from the main feed. And they're also uncensored, and they're ad-free. You're also going to get a review, are issues, which are short articles that I write reviewing games that I'm not talking about on the show itself, in the format of the old gaming magazines that we would read as kids. Right now, there's an issue out on Balatro and Wario Land for the Virtual Boy, and Metal Gear for the MSX2. There's also a $3 tier that has even more bonus content, if you could believe it, like the aforementioned Symphony of the Night episode, and tons more in the backlog. And it's $3. You can't even go to the grocery store right now and buy something for $3, which is why the Patreon is so cheap now. It's hard out here, man. If you can't gorge on groceries, what can you gorge on? Content, baby. Oh, man. The United States economy is depressing. I'm sorry. If that doesn't faze you, and you're perfectly fine right now, maybe you're perfectly fine to leave a review for the show. It's a horrible transition. Or maybe tell a friend or two, get this thing out here. Get people talking. Get them in my DMs. Why? I don't know. Listen, I'm not a real content creator. I don't know how to market this stuff. So you got to do it for me. I'm relying on you. Enough of the shilling. Let's talk about the game that I got to play today, and that game is Comix Zone. So what I always like to do is talk about my previous history with the game that I'm talking about before I get into the game proper. But since this is Player versus Podcast, what I usually like to do during this month is I reach out to the listener who submitted the game and not only ask why they picked the game, but what their previous history is with it. So this was, of course, picked by Joey Spatone. I reached out to Joey on that thing that used to be a blue bird or something, and they said, I found your podcast this year when I was looking for other podcasts talking about Sega games. I liked your Knuckles Chaotix episode and saw you haven't talked about Comix Zone. You're doing your Listener Appreciation Month, so I think it might be worth your time to play this one. I had this game when I was a kid and the only one of my friends that had a Sega Genesis. The rest had Nintendo consoles. Comix Zone was the card I would pull whenever they got too holier than thou about the Super Nintendo. I just wish Comix Zone had 2 players. You also seem to hate how Sega games look, so I'm looking forward to what you have to say about this one. Thank you, Joey. Appreciate the listen. Appreciate the kind words about Knuckles Chaotix. It was a fun episode. As for me, my previous history with Comix Zone, I don't have one. I've never played this game, and I don't think I even heard of it up until a few years ago. So I truly came into this game blind. But my first, initial impression, just based off of the box art, for this was that I was going to hate it. Like, there was something about this middle-aged dude with like Jinko shorts and combat boots that probably likes new metal, the new metal album that Primus put out in like 1999. It just doesn't give me the idea that this is going to be like an entertaining game. The guy on the front of the box, who is our protagonist, just looks like a typical you'd see sitting at the back of a concert venue talking about how many free they just gave a bunch of girls in the bathroom, and just how they quit their part-time job at Subway to stick it to their boss. Was this person me? You'll never know. So, yeah, initial vibes from the box art just alone had me wondering what kind of poverty Sega shoved out at the end of the Genesis life cycle here. But let's find out just what they did shove out at the end of the Genesis life cycle here. Was it a golden nugget, or did they spatter the inside of the toilet bowl full of diarrhea? Comix Zone is a beat 'em up, or a brawler, if you're a real gamer. I don't know. People are reclaiming the verbiage here recently. Funny how that goes sometimes. Anyway, it was developed by Sega Technical Institute and published by Sega. Comix Zone was designed and written by Peter Morawek, programmed by Adrian Stevens, with Howard Drossen in charge of the soundtrack. I'm actually happy that I get to talk about this game before another game that I have to cover in a few months here, because when Morawek presented the idea of Comix Zone to Tom Kalinske in 1992, it got put on the back burner in favor of Sonic Spinball. Now, Kalinske didn't exactly say no to making Comix Zone. After all, any good idea that came out of Sega was Kalinske's doing. Anything he's ever said, touched, made, created was gold. Everything, Kalinske was untouchable. I'm being sarcastic here. Console Wars is a book. Anyway, he did though. He was like, yes, we should make Comix Zone, but also we need a Sonic game because Sonic makes the bank account buzz, baby. And then they got Sonic Spinball. They made that. We'll talk about that game much later. So what Morawek did present to Kalinske was actually a fully functional demo of Comix Zone, which was then called Joe Pencil: Trapped in the Comix Zone. And it was something that he made on the Amiga of all things. And he got the inspiration from Aha's Take On Me. If you're not familiar with that song, it was the song that plays during the Donkey Kong Country part of the 2023 Super Mario Brothers movie. For no other reason than I guess it's just easier to throw money at licensed music than to actually hire somebody and make an actual film score. But don't think about it, just consume. Look at the bright, flashy colors. Look, it's Mario, guys. This is really what is going on today? This is turning out to be a classic Main Quest episode. But really, if you are not familiar with the song, or specifically the music video, which is where Morawek got his idea, you should definitely go check it out. The song is damn good, and the video is still equally as impressive. 40 years later, just threw up in my mouth a little bit. So Morawek was told to change the protagonist's name because it sucks. And also, since every good superhero had someone taking along with them in the comics, to also give our hero a sidekick. Along the way, the dev team grew larger in both the animation department and the music department. And to give the look and feel of an actual comic book, STI hired working comic book artists at the time to create reference work for the designers to work with. Among some of those artists were Alex Nino, who has done work with DC and Marvel, and Jonah Hex co-creator, Tony DeZunga. DeZunga? Not sure how to pronounce that. Howard Drossen was heavily inspired by the grunge bands at the time, so stuff like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, The Breeders. So created a soundtrack to attempt to match the post-apocalyptic sci-fi vibe that Morawek created. Drossen went even further and put together his own actual grunge band in hopes that they would be able to pack in a CD with the game with original music inspired by Comix Zone. But at this point, this is 95 Sega. They're really starting to pinch every penny that they could. So they did pack that in with the PC port of the game and one of the other, something else. But it did not go out with the Genesis game. Also similar to Vector Man, they put out a Sega Tunes release too. So from my understanding, the game had actually a pretty long development cycle, but the creation, like while they were making the game, it was going pretty smooth. STI had everyone at the company on board and pretty much had the good graces of everybody in the company. But of course, there were setbacks towards the end, which came in the form of additional programming for the last minute concepts that Morak was pushing to have in the game. Then you also have the fact that half of STI left after that black hole of development hell that was Sonic 2. And then you have the thing that this game is famous or infamous for, which we're going to talk about in depth in a little bit, is its difficulty. So this was also a last minute change, as the QA testers said that the game was too easy for its length and to make it more difficult. Morawick has gone on record saying that this was a mistake because of how people reacted to it not being able to finish the game, and furthermore, complicating the development of the game was the release of the 32X and the Saturn. So development, like once those consoles or add-ons and consoles were hitting the market, development for Comix Zone was abruptly halted. And the final two stages of the game were cut, and the game was basically pushed out the door to make this a tantalizing title for the aged Genesis hardware. And so as it goes, Comix Zone was released in North America in July 1995 for the Sega Genesis and September of the same year in Japan and Europe for the Mega Drive. Since then, it has been ported to the Game Boy Advance, Windows 3.1, Wii Virtual Console, Xbox Live Arcade, and the Nintendo Switch Online Genesis Library. Is the NSO Genesis Library called the Mega Drive Library in other territories? Like legit, I don't know. My pals from the PAL region need to speak up here. Let me know. And finally, in 2022, it was announced that a Comix Zone film was being developed. Wonder how that's going. Review scores for context. Next Generation gave it a 3 out of 5. Famitsu, 30 out of 40. Electronic Gaming Monthly, 7.825 out of 10. And All Game, a 4.5 out of 5. I'm going to start rounding those EGM numbers up because it's getting ridiculous out here. Furthermore, David Harrison on Google says, 1,000,000 times better than Fortnite. One of the best games of SoTime right here. Absolutely classic. Must play ampersand. I challenge you to beat it in under 2 hours. Challenge accepted, David. Challenge failed, David. I didn't even beat this game. Let's get into retro recollections here. This is, of course, the portion of the show where I reach out to you guys on either the Main Quest Discord, which is free, by the way, link in the show notes, or on social media, and I ask you what you thought about today's game, and you guys said, Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon of the Fun and Games and Reignite podcasts, says, a strange favorite of mine from the Genesis era. I love everything about this game. The story, concept, aesthetics, music, design, visuals. Well, okay, to correct myself, almost everything. The controls and the difficulty were the worst. A game I could never beat without Game Genie because it was so punishing. That said, I'm still nostalgic for it even now. I think it's totally worth playing and is completely unique for its time and today. Thank you, Matt. Soups says, I remember most of the first level of this game. It's too damn hard. It's enough to push a man over the edge. Thank you, Soups. Keep on edgy, my man. Mass Keaton says, why would you put so much work into doing so much awesome stuff with so many cool ideas and then lock all of it away behind a wall of difficulty so powerful that no one will ever beat the second level. Yeah, well said. Well said. End of episode. No, we get move on to Chris Copleen. Thank you, Keaton. I remember the hype for this game. It looked really cool. And the damn game is really good looking. Then I played it. I may have made it to the second level a few times, and that was enough to make me never want to play this tough as nails game ever again. Seek Ye Wisdom says, remember the title, don't remember the game. It's because Seek Ye is a master of gaming. He probably beat it in like 5 minutes and was like, yep, forgettable. Realistically, this game probably could be beaten in 5 minutes. Now I gotta look it up. What is the fastest speedrun here? 9 minutes. 9 minutes and 10 seconds by Andrew Dubb. What's up, Andrew? Anyway, moving on to the last retro recollection here. Lethco from the Afterglow podcast says, awesome concept and gameplay has some cool ideas with the inventory system. The problem is everything does too much damage and certain actions damage you that honestly shouldn't. Although I understand the thought of why it does, devs needed to remember it's a game at the end of the day. I always struggled to beat the second stage. So, thank you, Lethco. From the sounds of everybody that has submitted their thoughts on this is that you couldn't get past the second stage. And I will say, though I didn't beat the game, I did get past the second stage. I'm curious as to where everybody fell off. Hit me up in the Discord. So let's move on to the story and plot. First of all, if you've played Comix Zone and you've been listening to my episodes lately, you know what's coming here. The publisher logo, though. It's so unique. It's so clean. With this bright white background and a sketch of the Sega logo. Not sure how I feel about the Elvis impersonator, though, saying Sega. But sure. I'm still going to give it some style points here. It's good. You've already got me invested here. You got me interested, Sega. I'm in already. So we've got a game heavily inspired by comics, made by comic book nerds. So there's a lot of story here. When we look at the manual, there's a prequel comic actually that shows the events that lead up to the beginning of the video game. And I think it's really cool that they put it in here. I thought it was okay, if not a little weak in the story here, because when we start the game, we see our main protagonist, Sketch Turner, the drug dealer at the metal show, working on Comix Zone when he is pulled in by our villain of the game, Mortis, who actually resembles Judge Doom from Roger Rabbit. That's kind of what I got. But anyway, Mortis banishes Sketch into the very comic that he's been creating. Before this, though, General Cyan has been running around trying to tell the Emperor that Mortis plans on destroying Comix Zone. The Emperor doesn't believe her. For reasons. He just doesn't. I guess he's just a dick. And so General Cyan keeps alluding to this quote-unquote special operative that she needs to find. Like she's desperate to find this person. Which I take it to mean she knows who the creator is. Like she knows that Sketch is the answer to all of this. Because then otherwise, who is this special operative? We never find out. So I'm going to assume she is referring to Sketch. So if that's what they want us to believe, then I guess it's just by chance Sketch happens to get pulled in by Mortis, who is now in the real world. Which, like, Mortis didn't think this through, did he? Because now he's just, throughout the entire game, he just keeps drawing more bad guys in the comic, when all he really has to do is throw the comic book, like, in the fire. But then, what was Mortis's plan in our world? Because now he's just a guy. Like, he's got to pay taxes. He's got to get a job. He's going to need a car to get to the job. He should have just stayed a comic book villain. Also, I guess Mortis just pulls in the pet rat on accident. The pet rat is here. Real convenient. All of this is incredibly convenient and a little rocky when you start to think about it and pick it apart. But hey, it's original. I can't think of any other original IP at the time that was putting this much effort into the story in the same way this was, and in the style Comix Zone does it in. Plot holes aside, they mostly pull it off. I think with more sophisticated hardware, they could have really pulled off something a bit more coherent and a bit more, with a bit more depth than what we're given. But what's here is pretty damn good. One thing I think this game could have used, and that I could have used, was more General Cyan. Once she delivers a dose of exposition at the beginning of the game, she basically just drops off. I mean, she pops up every now and then, like she's relegated to the corner of the screen, like giving tips to sketch and stuff and dropping a little bit more exposition about what's going on so far in the story. In fact, it would have been much cooler to have her as a sidekick instead of the rat. You know, Joey brought up earlier that they wish that the game had a second player option, like a couch co-op thing. General Cyan would have been the perfect substitute for this stupid rat. But let's be honest, this is 1995. And I guess we valued rats over women back then. Don't blame me for that. One last thing I must bring to your attention, dear listener, because there's no way I'm passing something like this up. When you open the manual, there's a biography about Sketch Turner. Who he is, what he does, and some other stuff. So let me tell you what this says. So it says, occupation. He's a writer, artist on Comix Zone, and freelance rock musician. Look at this guy, this cool guy. Current residence, a warehouse, studio, loft kind of place in the Bowery. And then in parentheticals, that's in New York City. Dude, this guy's so cool. He sells the metal shows. Okay, so it's whatever. Typical 90s cool guy stuff right here. The only thing missing is him hanging out with a cool babe. But this is what I'm here for. This is what we're getting at. It says, when I'm not working, I like to play ear-deafening guitar, microwave pizza, read trashy sci-fi novels, and play Sonic Spinball. And then it says, I need a vacation. From what, my guy? Sonic Spinball? You need a... Oh no. What am I in? Will I need a vacation when I play Sonic Spinball? Of course they name dropped Sonic Spinball. They could have name dropped any other Sega Genesis game. Oh no. So at the top of the show, I called this game a beat 'em up. And that's kind of correct. You could get away with calling this game that, but then I think you would be doing it a disservice because it's a little more than that. I think it has more in common with 2D fighting games than even beat 'em ups themselves do. And then STI has also implemented these puzzle segments into the game, which are also pretty crucial to progression, which as far as I know, beat 'em ups don't have at all. At least every beat 'em up that I've played doesn't, I think. You just pretty much go right. Ask Yuzo Koshiro about that one. So, what do I mean about the fighting game comparison? Well, first of all, it controls incredibly close to something like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, more Mortal Kombat than Street Fighter. The movement here feels like a fighting game, like a 2D fighting game, with the added benefit of a pretty decent jump and a slide, along with you get a toy box of combos here, and you get to block. You can block. There's a block button. Structurally, it is also very similar to a fighting game because the game is working within the boundaries of a comic book page. So each stage takes place on 2 full comic book pages, but each screen is segmented by a panel. So instead of inching forward and a flood of enemies walking on the screen like in any beat 'em up that you would play, in Comix Zone you're moving panel to panel, facing off in a 1v1 battle or sometimes 1v2. Usually nothing more than that, because with the graphical fidelity of this game, I'm pretty certain, along with the hardware that it was running on, I'm pretty certain that they probably couldn't fit any more sprites in this game without setting the Sega Genesis on fire. And then the other thing that further separates this from your ordinary beat 'em up at the time are the branching paths. There's a ton of optional paths for you to take in the game that ensures that you won't need to have the same experience with every playthrough. There are hidden panels or screens as well, provided that you know how to solve the puzzles to get to them. And all of this is great. All of this is really cool. It feels very unique, but familiar, and it hooked me in very quickly. And I have gone on record to say that I hate beat 'em ups. I don't really like them that much. So right off the bat, Comix Zone has a lot of stuff working in its favor. Very, very good setup here. Now, let's dispel the myth that the game is difficult. Okay. Well, I can't do that because this game is harder than an anime fan on prom night. Somebody might get what I'm saying there. It's really difficult. Why is it difficult, though? Besides for what I talked about in the development history. But how did STI make it difficult? That's the question. And there's a few reasons. Enemies can be really cheap. There isn't any way to combo them out of a block or any way to stagger them out of their block. If the enemies are blocking, they will just block for as long as they want to. And as soon as your combo is over, there's a small window of invulnerability that they will take advantage of and kick your shit. No problem. It is an absolute certainty that once you're done with your animation, that enemy is going to kill you. The only remedy to these situations, which happen pretty often, are some of the items that you pick up along the way. So you get your bombs, your grenades, paper airplanes, and a screen clearing super. The only problem is you can only hold up to 3 items. One slot will and should always be taken up by the rat because he is pretty much essential to finding the other helpful items that you can find, as well as the secret areas and helping you solve the puzzles. So when you think about it, you're actually only left with 2 slots, which another one should be designated for healing because you will need to heal. My God, you will need to heal because everything hurts you. Everything is hurting you. Other people hurt you when you hurt them, which is like a lesson you should learn in life. All right. So now if we do the math here, you only actually have 1 spot in your inventory. You got 1 item slot, not 3, which would be for whatever offensive secondary weapon that you want, which you may not be able to use in any given battle situation because you might need it to pass an obstacle in order to progress. So now we can circle back to everything hurting. Every other panel has a puzzle for you to figure out. Some of them involve figuring out how to hit a lever or a switch on the other side of the panel or something to lower a bridge or drain sewage or something, while others involve having to get past some sort of obstacle. Some of the puzzles are incredibly obtuse, especially for a game like this. There were a few panels that I was stuck on and I had no idea what I had to do, so I had to pull up a Let's Play to figure out exactly what it is the game was asking me. This is where the rat comes in. The rat solves some of these issues, which means you're going to have to use them and you're going to come across a situation where you don't have them. But thankfully, you can get out of most of these situations by brute force. But that damages you. Need to open a door, but don't have the rat or a bomb or something else to open it? Well, you can punch it down, but it damages you. Oh, you don't have enough health to punch the door down? Guess you're dying and starting the level over, or worse, getting a game over. The game puts you in so many of these situations, which makes the enemy encounters even more frustrating because you know you need the item you have in stock for a panel coming up. And by the time you get there, unless you've been playing this game like 100 times throughout your life, you're only slightly better off health-wise by the time you get there than the last time you were there without the item, and you still might die. In some situations, there are items you can only reach by knocking down a box or something, and sometimes, oh yeah, because the box blows up, along with the item that you wanted. So now you're double ya. You got hurt punching the box, you got hurt by blowing it up, you lost health, and then you also lost the health pickup that was probably on top of the box. And it should go without saying here with a game this difficult, but common enemies are damage sponges, and they deal out a ton of damage to you. And it's agonizing. It gets exhausting. And so, like I said, I didn't finish the game. I would say it took me 12, maybe a bit more than that, 12 tries or so to get through the first stage, which honestly wasn't too bad. The first stage is not bad. But then the second stage, which everyone in the Retro Recollections has corroborated with me, is very hard. I can't even count how many times it took me to get through it. I don't remember. I was playing this game for like between 5 to 6 hours, and the majority of the 5 hours I spent playing this was on stage 2 alone. And I got through it, and I got to the third stage in pretty bad shape, and I quickly died and was like, I'm calling it. I'm calling it. I looked at the speed run. It's 9 minutes. And if you played this game enough, you could probably finish this game casually. If you're like really, really good, 25 minutes. I spent 6 hours playing this thing without, a podcast and a time commitment to other things. I could do this. I think I could do this. Who was the guy on Google that I needed to accept his challenge? Well, I failed it because I spent more than 2 hours playing this, but could I beat this game? Probably. Not today. Not for this. Not right now. I got other stuff I can enjoy. So I got to say, Joey, man, congrats. Congrats. You and Ryan sit on a throne side by side. You've defeated me. But if you put Fester's Quest and Comix Zone next to each other, and you told me to pick one, I'm not only going to kick Ryan in the dick and throwing Fester's Quest out of the window, but I'm also picking Comix Zone 100% of the time. Ryan, I love you. You're my boo. Don't take it to heart. You know what you did to me that one year. So I think that's all I've got on gameplay here. Like up front, it presents itself as like a very unique, innovative, and magical idea that STI brought to life. It's like incredible, but it's horribly flawed It is painful. But like knowing how much of a passion project this was and how the end product turned out, it's a bummer. It really is a massive bummer. Shake it off. Shake off the bad juju here. Let's talk about something that everybody can unanimously agree upon. This game is a visual masterpiece. It's stunning. It's absolutely insane. It isn't enough that they nailed that comic book aesthetic, which almost seems easy in comparison to the rest of what's going on in this game visually. There's reflections in the water. Reflections in the water on a 16-bit console that moves in tandem with the sprites. The different animations Sketch has depending on how he's moving panel to panel. Sometimes he'll grab the edge of the panel and jump down. Sometimes he'll squeeze the outside wall of the panel and slip right through to the next one. Sometimes he'll bash right through the barrier into the next one, hurting himself, of course, but it looks cool. And I don't remember, like, it brings up a memory of an episode I did recently. I don't know what game I was talking about when I last said this about the parallax scrolling here. Was that Vector Man? I think I said, like, Vector Man was, like, the best use of parallax scrolling that I've seen on the Genesis. Comix Zone blows that out of the water. It's not even close. The way the game is able to convey so much depth, it's astounding. The second stage, the one that everybody's dying on, the one that I think it takes place in that temple on the top of a mountain, it's drop dead gorgeous. STI was also able to implement these pseudo 3D effects, which really reminded me of like particle effects that you would see now in like 4K ultra high def definition. I said high def definition. Way to be redundant, Keith. But there's like these almost like particle effects when enemies or objects explode. Like they just burst into little shreds of paper that fill the screen and like convincingly like slowly trickle down to the bottom of the screen. You guys, I was in awe playing this. And you talk about like the enemy designs, you know, they're fine. They're creative. They're kind of typical for, I guess, a sci-fi setting, but they're good. The other thing, too, that I was impressed by was that there's barely any slowdown in this game. Like, visually, I don't know. I don't know what else I can say. This is probably going to be the best-looking Genesis game that I will play for the show, or that I will probably ever see. Now, the soundtrack here, I'm a little confused about the soundtrack. There isn't anything here that reminds me of grunge. And like I said, the Elvis voice at the beginning doesn't really help my impression of the soundtrack either, because this like sounds something closer to like hillbilly rock or like country than grunge. I don't know. There's always this weird twang, this like little country twang in some of the songs that just throws like the entire thing off. I think it's funny, like when I read my notes for the development history of this game, and that Drazen was trying to complement the setting of Comix Zone with this grunge soundtrack, and I was like, but did you? Because like with the visuals and everything, the soundtrack doesn't really match. It feels off to me. However, when you listen to the Sega Tunes rendition of these songs, with full vocal tracks, by the way, and it's like, okay, good. Yeah, this is good, which is the same thing I did for Vector Man I'm going to do with this episode, is I'm going to put the Sega Tunes stuff in here. It's good. It kind of sounds like We Have Mud Honey at Home, or like Timu Dinosaur Jr.? I just don't think, and here we go, everybody, the Genesis sound chip could probably handle something like this. So there we go. There it is. Now we have a real Sega Genesis review a la Main Quest. Because I said it. I talked about how shitty the sound chip is. But small gripes aside, this is like an S++ tier, like God tier presentation. You are not going to find anything better on this console. Nothing. I dare you. This is nothing short of stunning. So here we are, guys, as an entire package. What do I think about Comix Zone, and could I recommend checking it out? And I have to be careful about what I say. Games like these, I feel like I really need to take the difficulty of the game on a case-by-case basis. Because Main Quest isn't really a podcast about games for gamers. That wasn't my intention, but it also kind of became that because of course it did. So I'm speaking to all of you who are of various skill levels, and so what I find difficult may not be difficult for you, and vice versa. But when I looked at the contemporary reviews and how the average gaming enthusiast thought that it was too hard back then, well, that's kind of who I'm speaking to. And I think those reviews are right. And again, it's even corroborated by Peter Morak himself and by my own listeners who contributed to the Retro Recollections. So taking difficulty out of the equation for just a second. My entire playthrough, I told myself that Comix Zone takes the best of Battletoads and Earthworm Jim and makes it work in a way that those games couldn't. Comix Zone just feels really good to play. And it is fun to play and watch. Like, spectating a person who has played through the game multiple times can be very entertaining. The only thing this game really needs is some way to parry the enemies or some way to stagger them so that they aren't spamming block all the time. And so then I think that way, you could shave off a bit of the edge that makes this game so difficult. And I do love the strategy elements here. I do think it was a fantastic, like, big brain move to put puzzle elements into a beat-em-up turned 2D fighter. And with more capable hardware, who knows what they could do to flesh the story out better. But the difficulty is there. It is going to play a role in my recommendation. All of these great ideas are marred by the imposed difficulty, and for that, it's a light not recommend. I think after the first level, not only would you, dear listener, agree, but I think any other hardcore retro gamer would also agree. And definitely into the second level, you would be there with us, right? Comix Zone begs for your patience, and I don't think a majority of people would give it the time of day. But you should at least give it a few minutes of your time, just so you can be in awe of its presentation. To sit there and play this game and wonder how it came out in 1995. How is it a game that old? And it looks like it just came out this year for the PS5. It truly is that stunning. And so I guess this is usually where I would say they should remake Comix Zone. And they should. A sequel did get greenlit for the Saturn, but it was scrapped because the Saturn, and I'm not sure what they were planning to do with it. because 2D wasn't easy to do on the Saturn. And I somehow find it hard to believe that they would make it look anywhere near as good as they were able to do here. And if they went 3D, I don't know about that. They should definitely stick to 2D. Honestly, they should have just moved the development from the Saturn to the Dreamcast. And like, this is a remake like where they wouldn't need to do a lot of work either. Just make the exact same game again. Flesh out the plot a little bit more, because you can do that. And add the 2 stages that were cut. And then, of course, make the combat a little more robust. And I think you've got something that would probably sell pretty well right now. And who knows, if this movie ends up being made, the IP could totally be reinvigorated and we might get a new game. I don't know. Who knows? I would like to see it. Hey, Joey, thank you so much for recommending this game to me. Thank you for listening. And I'm happy you're enjoying the program. It means a lot, and I hope this episode was worth it, so thank you. But of course, we have to move on. A new challenger awaits. As Player vs. Podcast Month continues with a game nigh a franchise that I've ignored for 20 years. It's Kingdom Hearts. Thank you so much for listening. Take care of yourselves, and always remember, it's okay to like a video game.